Hey, this is Jude for Movie Entertainment Magazine. Well, at TIFF 2010, I spent many hours at the lovely GAT headquarters in downtown Toronto. Today, my chat with filmmaker Deborah Chow, whose indie flick, The High Cost of Living, won Best Canadian First Feature, the Skky Vodka Award. Here it is now.
So you were mentored by Patricia Rozema, is that right?
I was, yeah. The project actually started, weirdly enough, it started at TIFF because I had a short film in the festival. And when I was here with the short, they were doing for the inaugural Kodak New Vision mentorship,
Right.
which they were giving to a female filmmaker that had a short in the festival. And so they wanted to give me the award, but they would only do it if I had a feature project, which I didn't at all. So basically I was given like 3 days to come up with it
Really?
if I wanted the award. So, and I was actually, it was all going on, like I interviewed for it, and then I was in Montreal at the premiering at the Montreal World Film Festival.
Right.
And I'm like trying to like develop this feature idea, like standing in their like filmmaker's lounge on a French keyboard going, oh my God, like I couldn't get the accents off. And so I did eventually get it, and this is the project I started with them. So it was Patricia Rozema and Dan Lyon who were the first people that they, you know, it was so different back then, but so I worked with her for about a month on the original inception.
Very cool.
Of it.
I like her.
Yeah.
I like her work.
She's great.
Yeah. So the story is so troubling. It's very intense. Yeah. Do you have any children?
I don't know.
You don't?
No.
So, because I have a daughter, and I remember when I was pregnant, I had to go in for, what's it called when you get the needle? Amnio. Yeah. Yes, the needle in the belly. And it was just that terror of something going wrong, and I mean, I just flashed right back to being a very pregnant woman, and I just thought, if that was me, and my fetus had died, and I was walking around, I just, you know, it was so heartbreaking, really heartbreaking. So, where did you come up with the idea for the story?
The story kind of, you know, because I've been working on this project for 5 years, so it's where it started to where it is now. For me, actually, I was living in New York at the time, and I'd gone to film school in New York, and I knew that I was going to come back to Canada for, you know, basically to move home and then to make my first feature. And I wanted to, I sort of started with Montreal as the starting point for it, and then I knew that I was going to do it in that city, so that sort of began the inception of, you know, because of the language situation there and all that. That became sort of the basis for the characters. And my sister was actually pregnant at the time I was starting the project, and you know, it was her first kid, and I was there with her when she delivered it, and I just remember going through it with her, and it was so strong, like just the visual image of a pregnant woman is so strong, and then there's so many there's just so many things with expectations upon the behavior of how a pregnant woman should act, or, you know, sort of the morality surrounding being pregnant these days. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And that kind of was like, you know, if you remember the movie, there's the scene when she's drinking. And that was part of, you know, and at that point it wasn't sort of really like, you know, so clear, you know, is it dead, is it not? And I had versions of the script where it wasn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's kind of been through a lot, but it just sort of evolved that way.
So it seemed very important that the child was dead.
It definitely is,
because there's such, I mean, that the romance between the two protagonists, it's so authentic, and you really want them to get together. Yeah. But he's done this thing that it's irrevocable. It's like it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. Love. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting take on unrequited love. Was it harder or easier to work with an actor who's also a writer, producer,
writer / director / star? Yeah. He was great. Honestly, you know, he really was fantastic with me, and he very much came as an actor. And the things that were, you know, he is a director for sure, and he's a very good one. And one of the best things for me was that, like, right from the beginning, when I first met him, I mean, he was so thorough in asking me about the project, and he was, you know, the story and sort of my vision for it. And from the very beginning, he basically was making sure that we wanted to make the same movie, and we did. And he, more than anyone, I think, understood actually the kind of movie I was trying to make and understood the references. But he had been trying to develop Open Hearts, a Susanna Bier's film, for quite a long time himself as a director. And that film, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a tiny budget film, and it's so similar to my movie. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like it has an accident in it, and then it's very sort of serious, Danish drama, and it's very full on. And that's his reference, and so he knew exactly what he was getting into, and we had the same vision for it. So he was really, supportive, and he was so good through the whole process.
He was fantastic in the
I know,
film.
And it's very different for him. He's not. I don't think he's usually perceived as in kind of serious roles.
Right.
Everybody thinks of him as being sort of funny and
but it had those moments where it was lighthearted, with the hat and the. When they bought the disguises, and you could feel that he was. I think that gave him the real person feeling. That he had a sense of humor, and that even though their situation was quite desperate and angst filled, he joked around, and he had that playfulness that her husband didn't have at all. So, her husband was so remote. It was great how you captured that. So did the fact that you made him an American, was that a metaphor?
It was always intentional because, I was in the States for so long with school and somewhat that, I lived in New York for ages, and so it made, it was part of who I was as well. So as well, like for me, I'm very much an Anglophone living in Montreal.
Right.
And so I'm a bit of an outsider, and then I'm Asian, and it's sort of, I'm a bit of a weirdo there. So,
or exotic.
Yeah, exactly. Exotic's the nicer word for weirdo. So he's kind of represents in a way. I kind of identify more with him, that he's sort of this outsider, and all his visa troubles are my visa troubles from the States, trying to live in New York with, once you get off your student visa. So, it was a totally natural choice because I knew New York so well, and it was like my experience in reverse,
Okay.
So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that...
And then also I knew that I, would probably want to cast an American, so it made sense.
So I love the shower scene where she can't look at her own naked body.
Yeah.
How did that was that something that was everything on the page that you shot, or was there any improvised moments, or?
It was pretty close. I mean, we shot the film in 20 days, so when you're running that fast, there's not a lot of room to improvise.
Right.
You're barely getting 2 takes of key.
Right.
So it would have been nice because they were good at it to improv, especially Zach. So for the most part, it was entirely, I'd say 95% is scripted, and then there's probably about 5% more so the banter, like the hopscotch scene and things like that, where it was lighter.
Yeah.
Where that was improv, and a lot of that was Zach, and because
a
lot of the funnier stuff, he would kind of improv on, which was great because he's very funny.
So those moments where
those were definitely scripted.
Those were very powerful. They were small. Just I think I would have had the same reaction as her. Actually, I don't think I could have looked down. That the actress Isabelle, she's fantastic.
She is.
Yeah, she conveyed so much with her eyes.
She's very natural. But
yes.
The great thing, we were really lucky with Isabelle. She actually came onto the project first, and she was attached first, and she was so good. It's like as we were trying to find the financing, she stayed with it and was always, she was so committed to the project. But the crazy thing was that as we were trying to raise the financing for 2 years, she got pregnant and had a baby, a healthy, happy baby, during the whole time. So by the time we shot, she was about, I think her little boy was about 9 months old. So she was still just finishing breastfeeding, and her body was still post-pregnancy, and she had just been through the whole thing. And so all of her physicality, everything, and she said, I was a little worried. I was like, oh God, is she going to want to do this still after, going through this? And she said more than ever, because she realized, gave her a gravity to understand really what it meant to lose, you know, and she had her happy little boy at home. So we were, I mean, it was kind of, I would have been happy to have shot 2 years earlier and not waited that 2 years, but at the same time it was great for her